Good day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. In this video we're going to talk about housing, everything you need to know about housing, how it works, etc. right now in World of Warcraft. And yeah, let's get started. So let's talk about access to housing. So currently at this point in time, only players who have pre-ordered the World of Warcraft Midnight expansion will have access to housing. However, all players will currently have the ability to collect housing items, as well as obviously add those housing items to their housing dashboard and catalog. So even if you don't own the expansion, you can still own the items, just cannot access the house itself until the expansion goes live. Obtaining your house is incredibly simple. All you have to do is log in on a character that has housing as viable. You will receive a quest called A House for You, and this will require you to travel to your capital city for your faction. If you are a Horde, that will mean Orgrimmar. If you are an Alliance character, that means that you will have to head over to Stormwind. Your character can have one house per faction, so one Horde house and one Alliance house, and these houses can be visited by your character once you have them unlocked, regardless of faction, but only a character of the same faction can unlock the house. In your capital city, you will now have what's called a neighborhood portal. This will be available in both Orgrimmar and Stormwind, and by right-clicking this, you will move to your faction's associated neighborhood. This will allow you to purchase your house and begin your housing journey. Before we continue, let's talk about neighborhoods and discussing a private versus a public neighborhood, the differences, and essentially how they work. So firstly, let's talk about what is a neighborhood. When you first spawn in to your housing area, you will be assigned a randomized neighborhood. You will have no control over who you are placed with. You will simply enter and spawn into a random neighborhood. Neighborhoods are persistent. If you build your house in a neighborhood, your neighbors and the players around you will remain the same whenever you spawn back. For example, you can see all these plots are owned by players. If I build my house here, all these same players will persist in the same neighborhood. Neighborhoods have a lot of different benefits. One is namely the renown system, which we'll talk about a bit just now. But basically, neighborhoods function as your own little community. Neighborhoods are going to be some interesting different ways to be slightly unique. Neighborhoods will be able to have slightly differing events on at different times, and basically certain communal spaces could become adjusted in neighborhoods. When you look at neighborhoods, there are two major options. You have your public and private neighborhoods, and we're going to talk about the difference now. So a public and private neighborhood. So a public neighborhood is created basically every time a neighborhood is full. Any player can buy any building in any public neighborhood. So for example, if I speak to the major housing vendor for the Alliance, Lizabelle Dawnpetal, and I say I want to see other neighborhood options, she will then show me all the public available sections. By clicking on these, I can then choose any plot inside of these areas, refresh, find new ones, and essentially decide where I want to move in as a player. The more plots available, the less players currently in that neighborhood. More will open up as the game sees fit per server. Those are public neighborhoods, and essentially they are very much run by the game overworld and are essentially the easiest, simplest way to get involved in housing. Private neighborhoods are slightly different. If you speak to Lizabelle Dawnpetal, or the housing NPC in your area, you can speak to them and say, I'm interested in founding my own neighborhood. This allows you to create your own neighborhood where your players are required to have membership of a certain type to have access to this neighborhood. This neighborhood has to have a minimum group size. It is a neighborhood that is named by the owners of the neighborhood, and you have a lot more community control over what events and things run in that neighborhood at any given time. Now, there are only two ways to organize a private neighborhood. The first is guild neighborhoods, which are created for members of a guild and maintained through the guild interface. And the next are charter neighborhoods, which are created by arbitrary groups of players and managed through a special charter interface. Private neighborhoods have their names set by the owners, And basically, making yourself a private neighborhood is a way for you to essentially give yourself some kind of control over your neighborhood, but really it isn't anything super different otherwise. I would suggest, of course, doing a private neighborhood if you are so inclined as to have yourself privacy and control. Maybe you have a large group of friends that you wish to get those types of upgrades and community with. Now that you understand the basics of the neighborhood, let's talk about building our first house. So in the plot, there are two ways to build a house. You can simply click on the plot inside of the house, and once you are there, you will be able to build yourself a plot. So for example, if I go around and I click this house, for example, and I then travel there, when I get there, I will be able to purchase that housing property. Or alternatively, as I mentioned before, if you're looking at a specific neighborhood of some kind, then you have the ability instead to obviously purchase that by saying you are looking at other neighborhood options, opening the house finder, and then you can click an available plot here. And by doing so, you can click visit, automatically transfer there, and then you will be able to purchase that building. If you wish to move, it is the exact same way. So moving your house is very simple. As long as there's an open plot, you can move your house with very, very, very quick ease. However, moving your house obviously has that gold surcharge, which you'll need to be mindful of. But that's really about it. So once you've built your house, moving it is actually very simple. So you don't have to panic about, being in a situation where other players or your friends, you won't be able to move to them. Once you are at your chosen plot, all you have to do is simply right click it and click buy. Your first plot will cost you nothing, moving your house will cost you 1,000 gold, and from there you are pretty much ready to go into some of the more advanced mechanics. So let's run through the housing dashboard. The housing dashboard contains a lot of different actions. Firstly, the housing dashboard will show you all your active houses. So when you have a plot for Horde and Alliance, both will show here. The housing dashboard can be accessed through your UI, and it also allows you to open up and find empty plots where you could potentially move to as well. So the housing dashboard allows you to have very, very, very good control over everything you need to do. It's also the easy screen to start accessing things like current endeavors, housing level, and also your placement budgets. So let's talk about those. So let's talk about placement budgets. So what are placement budgets? So placement budgets are essentially how many items you as a player can place in your house. To increase the amount of item placement that you have, you will need to increase your housing renown. Your housing renown is very simple. It is tied to your community renown and your house EXP. As it says here, house EXP is earned by completing endeavors, endeavor tasks, and collecting decor of uncommon or better rarity for the first time. Every time you collect a decor piece, you will have that piece added to your log and register. By having that added, you will be able to increase your overall level that you have for your house, and thus being allowed to place more items inside of your house and place more rooms inside of your house. So this will expand over time, and players will gradually be able to add more items, which is very, very, very crucial. Although not in the game currently, endeavors are essentially, to cut a long story short, different activities that players will be able to perform within their neighborhood. Endeavors are task-based events that will last a certain amount of time, and they will occur in the crucial overworld hubs in your community. So for example, by certain overworld locations, you will find that there will be events of a certain kind where you'll be able to participate in them and earn yourself currency, decor, etc., which is very, very crucial. This will all tie in to your neighborhood favor and your housing favor, which is crucial towards upgrading your house and decorative items. So we're going to talk about customizing your house in two different sections. The first will be exterior section, the second will be your interior. So firstly, to customize the exterior of your building, you will need to first be on your plot of land. Once you are active on your plot, you will see the customization options open up. When you click the Edit House option, you have a couple alternative options for placing things. So firstly, you have your Decorate mode. You then have your Advanced mode, which allows you to move and rotate items. Your Customization mode, which lets you adjust how certain floors or items look within your house. For the exterior, this doesn't allow you to change too much. You then have Cleanup mode, which allows you to remove multiple decorative items quickly. And then you have your Edit House Exterior. Before we talk about that, let's talk simply about decorations and moving your house. So in the exterior mode, if you click on the building, you can move your building wherever you wish. This allows you to move the building within the confines of your plot, rotate it using the mouse, and everything else that you need. With the external area, you can place any furnishing items that you want in the external area. You have your own external placed decor amount. So outside, you have a limit of 200, and you are free to place whichever items you wish in the outside area. For example, if I place this merchant store, it will count towards my outside place decor, not my inside place decor. Much like with inside, you will learn that each item has a cost, and that cost will add itself to your total cost overall. When it comes to advanced options, clicking on items and being able to tilt them slightly, adjust them slightly, elevate them, de-elevate them, or to maybe adjust items in terms of their presentation. Your customization mode will allow you to re-dye items if they have that, but the most important one will be your exterior. This allows you to change the actual outside appearance of your house. For example, you can change where your entranceways are, you can change where windows are, you can change your roof, so how you want your roof to look, and essentially you are able to upgrade and change different parts of your house. So this is obviously great for players who are looking for a certain external appearance, and you can adjust these as you see fit. Once you're happy with the adjustments, you can then proceed with the internal adjustments. What is important is that you cannot build on the external and affect the internal. So anything you do externally will not affect your building internally and vice versa. Now internal has the same type of mechanisms. When you click Edit House, you will have the ability to place decor. You have the ability to adjust that decor using more advanced settings. You will have the ability to customize decor if possible. So this is great, especially for things like floors, where you can change potentially what floor you want within your house, and the walls, where you may want to change the wall options for your house. All of this is done with the customization mode. The most important one will be your floor plan. This allows you to actively change the rooms in your building. This is limited by your room placement budget, much like your item placement budget. To do this, you will need to select a joining point, then select a room. Once you've done this, you can then extend out from there. However, it's going to have a cost associated depending on obviously what you are looking to do. For example, if I want to add an octagon sized room, an incredibly large room, that will cost me 8, which will bring my limit up quite quickly. Similarly, if I wish to add a stairwell and replace this with a stairwell, I simply have to remove the item first. So remove the room, then I must click the stairwell, and this will give me a stairwell. The stairwell will always go up from the base floor. Once I have clicked the stairwell, I can then look to build off of it in terms of the height. Again, to do this, once you've added the stairwell, you will need to go to the bottom right hand corner, click floor 2, and then you will be able to expand your stairwell up and add a room on top of it. Once you've done that, then you can start to expand upwards. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to, but ultimately you cannot build without having spare room capacity, and with the spare rooms you cannot do anything until you have a joining room, keeping it very simple. Other than that, once you have built a room, feel free to do whatever you want with it. It's ultimately entirely up to you what you do with it next, which is very, very crucial. Once you have built your rooms, you can then proceed with filling them out, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail now. So let's talk first about customization. Customization is option number 3, and it's one of the first things you'll probably want to do around your house. Customization allows you to adjust the wall styles, so allows you to adjust your wall styles and your wall materials. These are the number 1 important things to consider, as obviously this will set your overall look for your house. If you click on a doorway, so if you click on a wall by a door, you can also select to have a standard or wide doorway. This is important because it will decide whether you want the room to basically have a wide open entrance, or whether you wish the room to actually have a standardized doorway, and of course the associated controls with that. If you build a staircase, you will also be able to control the materials of the staircase itself. If a wall is not connected to another room, you will have no option for doorways, so you will not be able to place any doorways upon that wall until such time as a room has been placed behind it. Everything else you do will be in the first point, which will be the decorate mode. What is important here is that you can place interior walls. These walls are dividing walls that you can place separate from your standard structure walls. These walls allow you to subdivide a room and allow you some sort of control over the internal place of your house. So for example, if I want to subdivide a space, I can place these walls and it will give me the ability to do so. On top of that as well, this will also be where you place windows. This will allow you to place windows, which, although unable to look outside, will provide some kind of soft lighting for a room. So although they do not technically give you a view into the outside world, they do give you some different lighting options. What's important to take note with any type of decorative item, whether you are placing a structural item, which you can find under the structural section, or whether you are placing, for example, furnishings, you actually have to have multiple copies of that item. So if you want to place more than one of those items, you actually need to have multiple variations of that item. You cannot just have one copy. It's not like transmog where there's just a copy you can endlessly place. For example, if I want to place multiple different fireplaces and I want them to all be the same, I actually have to actively have multiple copies of that fireplace in my storage. It's not just enough to have one. I have to actively have different copies of that storage. What's also important is that you have the option to ignore collision on your items. This will allow you to change their placement, but also could potentially affect how they interact or their interactability in the open world, especially with fireplaces where you can right click them to interact with them. This could be affected by your placement of those items. So let's talk about getting housing items. So getting housing items is pretty straightforward. There are some various vendors in the towns that will give you some solid items. These can be outside items that you can purchase. Please remember again that you need to have exactly multiple copies of the item. So it's not going to be enough for you to simply have one or two of the item. You need to unfortunately have multiple variations of the item to be able to place multiple versions of it. So it's not just going to be enough to have one. Aside from that, once you do have multiple different styles of the items, you will be able to place those around your house. You also unlock a ton of items from different methods. So crafting is one of the best methods. Achievements is also one of the best methods, being able to give yourself certain achievements. There are also certain dungeons that now drop housing items. So if you go to your adventure guide, if you go to dungeons, for example, I'll just give you one like Legion. So in Legion, there are now certain bosses that will drop different housing items, which is pretty interesting, I think, for most people, and gives you some additional little interesting reasons to go back and run some of these dungeons, which I think is really straightforward and really awesome. But yes, vendors, different sorts of achievements, different sorts of, basically all sorts of methods to obtaining your lovely little alternative items. And most of these are very cheap as well, so you don't have to panic too much about the cost of items. You will be able to pick up quite a bit, especially in terms of the walls that you need to subdivide. A lot of them are very straightforward and purchasable, so a lot of the basic items you need for your house are going to be very straightforward and very easy to put together, which is going to be really great. Before we leave the basics of housing for you to go and enjoy, just a couple things to mention. So firstly, in access from your house, you can teleport to your plot at any time, but it has a 15-minute cooldown, so just keep that in mind, basically. So that's one of the major things. Secondly, as well, be also very mindful that there will be a lumberjack vendor. Speak to them to pick up a hatchet so that you can have one of them on hand. This allows you to harvest wood, which will become more relevant later on as you potentially get into crafting decor items for your house. Other than that, honestly, it's pretty straightforward. So as a player, everything else should be achievable through exploration and basically giving yourself the next best thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.